Each week I'm going to be posting 1 to 4 videos, and they're going to be going over the content that you guys will be going over in your readings and in any other materials that I'll be posting for you. I might also be drawing in material from other sources as well. If I do that, I will try to link all other sources into a supplemental reading file in UNM Learn. So if you're interested in looking at any of the links, I will have those available for you in the supplemental reading file. So for this first lesson, we're going to be discussing an overview of the course itself, and then we're going to do another file separately for the introduction to the history of ethics and professionalism. Nuts and bolts of the course, I want to ask you, why are you here? So, I think the initial gut response is to say, well, it's required. Well, yeah, it's required. And so dig through that. And I think it's easy to cycle back to, well, okay, it's required for my credential. I want to be a behavior analyst, or I want to be a teacher, or I'm taking this course on some degree path. But then dig deeper than that. Why are you pursuing this degree path? Why do you think the study of ethics is important for this degree path? And I want you to dig into that, because what that's going to eventually get you to is something called a value statement. And the reason why I want you to get to that point is because as we discuss ethical principles, we're going to have the formal ethical principles. We're going to have the formal guidelines that are established by the agency. But ultimately, we are going to make a lot of these decisions off of our core values, our core statements. And those ethical principles guide us and help us on the decision-making path. But the things that cue us in that there's an ethical dilemma going on, that there's something not quite right with this situation, is going to be just signals from that value statement. If your value statement is something like, I don't want to hurt people, I want people to live a better quality of life, that's going to trigger for you when something is not aligning with that value. And so as we discuss ethics, I really want you to think through, well, what is that value for me? So once you've identified your core value that is driving your decisions right now, that has pushed you towards this career path, that is aligning you with what you want to be, we know that ethics have, however we define them, have some importance to us in that profession. We're going to spend the next 5 weeks learning exactly how those ethical principles apply to ABA. But I challenge you to identify the core of why you're here to anchor you, not just for navigating ethical dilemmas, but also to guide you as you go through your professional journey. So take a moment, think through what is your why statement, and I'll give you an example of mine. When I was applying for my PhD program, I remember writing an essay, and I said, I want to be on the forefront of efforts that promote evidence-based practice for individuals with autism spectrum disorder, because I want to help them improve their quality of life. Fair enough, right? It's not the worst value, it's not the best value, but it's one that anchored my journey. Now, as I've gone along and I've learned more and I've heard more adults, autistic adults, start to talk about their experiences with applied behavior analysis, they're saying things that are not consistent with what I went out and set out to do with my value statement. And they're saying that, well, it's actually not necessarily improving our quality of life. We are experiencing things that are counter to that value statement. And so that has stirred in me is a need to realign and to reassess, well, what are the actions that are really truly fulfilling this value statement? And so I am having to have a sort of a reawakening or a reanalysis of my journey myself, and to see, well, okay, how do I get back to the path that is towards that value? Because that value still stands, but the actions I take to get there are what need to shift. And so that is what I'm hoping that we start to learn and grapple with a bit together in this class. Our agenda for this class, we are going to be going over the class policies and procedures. Everything that you need to know is in the syllabus, but I will go over everything in detail so that way we can have a bit of a conversation about it. So it is a required course from the Behavior Analyst Certification Board. They are now requiring 45 hours of ethics training prior to your ability to sit for the assessment. And then for everyone who has already completed their BCBA, there are 4 additional hours of ethics CEUs that are completed every cycle. This arose from concerns in the field about unethical behavior and treatment, both historically and currently, and we're going to talk a lot more about that as we go along this semester. There have also been changes in the field of ABA, including a rise in the demand for behavior analysts that have maybe shifted the motivation for people who are pursuing this. So again, going back to that value statement, why are you here? With a change in the demand of any service, there's going to be an economic component there. And so I think with the influx of need for behavior analysts, there were some that came into the field with motivations that maybe weren't quite aligned with what needs to happen to be an effective behavior analyst who works ethically and compassionately. We work with vulnerable populations, and this increases the need for a focused attention on ethics. And by vulnerable populations, I don't just mean individuals with disabilities. I mean individuals from culturally maybe underrepresented backgrounds. I mean people with different communication styles. I mean people with different just paths in their life that make them just again, more vulnerable to maybe some of the things in terms of health disparities, economic disparities that we will have a chance to be talking about. So, what are ethics? It's a broad term, many definitions about it. At the core, ethics are moral principles that govern a person's or a group's behavior. And I like this quote, "Action indeed is the sole medium of expression for by Jane Addams. And as a behavior analyst, I want you to take a moment and consider how this relates to our class. Behavior analysts, our medium, our basis for decision making is through action. We measure behavior, we look at behavior, we use behavior as a tool to understand function, to understand intent, to understand motivation. So action is very, very, very much important to us. And this quote meaning that it is the sole medium of expression for ethics, I think really harnesses the heart of behavior analysis. The other thing we'll be talking about is professionalism. And this embodies the skill, the good judgment, and appropriate behavior that is expected from a person who is trained to do a job well. So again, take a moment, think about what this means to you. How do you exude professionalism in your current role? Our course objectives this semester are to learn about the historical context for developing ethical and professional standards in ABA. So we are going to be spending a lot of time talking about what brought up the need for ethics, what were the situations, what were the perceptions that went into the development of the ethical standards. We're going to become very familiar with the use of the BACB's Professional and Ethical Compliance Code. You are going to be analyzing it, you're going to be using it, you're going to be applying it. And then finally, I want you to be able to reflect on your personal dispositions and practices related to ethical and professional behavior. We all come with journeys, we all come with perceptions, we all come with biases that influence the way that we act in accordance or when confronted with a dilemma. And so I really want us to spend some time, again, assessing, digging. And we're going to have some difficult conversations potentially around some of those factors. Specific course policies and procedures. If you need accommodations, please let me know as soon as possible. I want to make sure that you are given the access to the course that you need. To reach me in terms of communication, the best way to reach me is through my main campus email. UNM Learn is set up through my North Campus email. Like I said, I did a postdoc, and so I have some North Campus affiliation still. I do check it. I just get a lot of emails there that can cloud my inbox, and so I will see your email much more readily in the oterot@unm.edu email address. Give me 24 hours to respond, Monday through Thursday, 48 hours on the weekends. If you don't hear from me after 48 hours, send me a nudge. It means that your email got lost or buried. If needed, please indicate time sensitive in your subject line if there's something you need me to attend to very quickly. I'm not having formal office hours this semester since we are all working from home, but you can arrange to meet with me via Zoom. I tend to be able to meet on Mondays and Tuesday mornings. For participation, it is factored into your grade. This includes completing all the readings, all of the assignments before our class, and that your attendance is required at all synchronous class meetings. So if you have difficulty, please let me know immediately. I can't guarantee that you'll be able to stay in the class if you have difficulty attending the synchronous class meetings, but if there are ways that we can try to build time for you to be able to be there, if we need to talk to employers or anything, I can't talk for you, but we can problem solve around that. Please be prepared to use your camera and microphone in discussion. So it makes things a little less remote when we can see each other when we have our synchronous class meetings. If you anticipate any technical difficulties with that, let me know. I know that some of us are working from different technological capabilities, different Wi-Fi, different things like that. I do notice a typo there, I'm sorry. All right, participation and professionalism. Now we are going to be broaching some topics that have deep meaning for us. Sometimes that's going to excite emotion from us. We might be feeling that something is stirring, and I think a lot of us are feeling particularly emotionally intense right now. We're in an intense moment. So sometimes that makes things fraught with hazard. And I don't want anybody leaving this class feeling attacked or discriminated or stirred in a way that is counter to your growth. So what I'd rather do is have some discussion guidelines set in advance, and we can talk about these more. I absolutely don't feel like these are hard and set in stone, and I want us to have some freedom with how these are applied. But there are some non-negotiable things. I don't want to shun hard topics. That's not my style. I do like to confront things, but I like to do that safely and with consideration. So what I ask for is active participation from every single one of you. We're not going to have well-rounded discussion by just listening to a vocal minority. So there are going to be opportunities for each of you. If you are not a person who likes to speak in a group, that's okay. There are going to be small group opportunities. There are going to be individual written response opportunities. There are going to be a lot of ways for you to express yourself. Just anticipate that I might be taking, especially your discussion points, and sharing them with the class. And so be ready for that. Also, because you're going to be present on camera, keep that in mind as well, that your presence needs to be expressed professionally. Be respectful of others' opinions and perspectives. Please respond with grace and professionalism. So, of course, there's not going to be no tolerance for inflammatory, discriminatory language, anything that attacks another person on the basis of race or gender or any other aspect of who they are just simply will not be tolerated. If it happens in a synchronous meeting, I will intervene. If it occurs person to person as a result of our discussions in this class, please let me know personally, as additional steps may need to be taken. This is not to be threatening. This is not to set us up to have a difficult discussion, but I do want to put something in place in case the event arises. And I would rather be proactive than reactive. When we're responding to things that we may have difficult thoughts about, or maybe even counter thoughts about, I want you to think through a good method of response. And what I like to do is acknowledge that you heard the other person. This is what I heard you say, and try to rephrase how they said it, try to re-summarize how they said it. Present your perspective in a respectful manner, and use I statements. I feel, I am curious about, I understand it this way. And maybe reiterate your thoughts that are something as your own and not something that is generalized to the belief of others. If at any time you feel you're becoming emotionally agitated or excited or just need to take a step back from the discussion, you can let me know privately in the chat, and that is perfectly fine. Please know that you will be required to come back eventually, but I understand that we are all in a moment that is just feeling a little bit more excitable. We're all a little bit more intense right now, and so I want to give you that freedom to be able to take care of yourself. Another norm for discussion is to refrain from the discussion of ethical questions pertaining to specific individuals, organizations, or situations publicly. The professional approach is to raise such questions privately with me. So I don't want us to be discussing something going on at a local agency that people may be able to recognize. Of course, it's not appropriate to identify a person. So I will be asking if you're having a discussion about a general statement or a situation that is maybe personal to you, to either talk about it with me first so we can discuss how to best approach it with the group. And the only exception to this is if it's related to a publicized event. So if there's a news article you read about a local agency or a national organization or a situation that occurred in some other state, that is of course appropriate as long as it's identified in a public space. I will not be providing guidance on ethical issues. Rather, I will direct you to the relevant resources for resolving the issue ethically and professionally. And this is something I need to hold myself to. I tend to like to give solutions, but I'm going to work really, really, really hard not to try to tell you the answer. So just know that. In terms of academic honesty, each student is expected to maintain the highest standards of honesty and integrity. Any student who has been judged to have engaged in academic dishonesty in coursework may receive a reduced or failing grade. This is consistent with the UNM catalog. In terms of how this pertains to the course, so you're going to have a term paper, and you're also going to be submitting discussion questions or responses to discussion questions. You are required to explicitly state where you are getting your information from. So what portion of your written work reflects your own ideas, and what is the idea of somebody else? So make sure that you are cognizant of that. You will need to include appropriate citations. We're going to be using the APA 7th edition manual for written work, so please be familiar with those guidelines and use that for your citations and your references and your term paper. Now, your discussion question responses do not need to be in APA format, so you don't need to do things 12-point font, 1-inch margins, double-spaced. Those can be typed directly into the paper, but please do use your citations and references in APA format. If you have questions about that, let me know. So if I do see an inadequate citation, I'll let you know and just say, hey, this seems to be from somewhere else, and I'll assume that it's unintentional. If it keeps happening, there are going to be additional consequences. If it's noted for the first time in your final assignment, you'll be assigned 0 points for that assignment. Now, this is for an egregious, you took something, and it is on the point of plagiarism. Now, plagiarism is submitting somebody else's work for your own work. This is a big deal, and we will apply the steps for inadequate citation for plagiarism as well, depending on how egregious it is. On the first instance, if it appears that a lot of the work you've submitted is truly the work of somebody else and it would be hard to see that as a mistake, we'll go straight to step 2 and I would have to notify your advisor and take off points. So just please do not submit work that has been submitted in another course as well. So that's called self-plagiarism. All of the work that you do for this course should be unique to this course. I don't offer rewrites for assignments, and I don't allow late assignments. That's just going to help us stay on track. So with that in mind, and with everything being based on technology, please give yourselves ample time to get things submitted. If you're encountering technical difficulties, hopefully I will encounter them first as I'm submitting things, and I will let you know. So I will have another route. If you are in a pinch, you can email your assignment to me as long as it's before the deadline. I might still ask you to upload your assignment after the deadline and it'll be marked late, but as long as I have it in my email, I won't apply the late policy to it. So for course evaluation, your attendance is required. So you're expected to complete sessions, requirements, and/or discussion posts on a weekly basis. Everything is due on Sundays. If you miss sessions, then there will be consequences to your grade. Missing 50 minutes or more of a synchronous class session will result in an absence. So if you miss the entire 2 hours, which we're going to be meeting in 2-hour chunks, then that will count as 2 absences. These are going to be the assignments that we'll be basing your grade on for this course. Each week, you're responsible for submitting responses to discussion questions, which I will provide on Mondays by noon. And then you will also be responsible for responding to a quiz. The quiz will range between 10 and 15 questions each week, always based on 10 points. Quizzes will typically be posted either Mondays or Wednesdays by noon. Case studies will be administered during our synchronous class meetings. You'll be assigned to groups to go over specific case studies, and then we'll present your group's findings. Each group will, of course, have a different case study. Your presentation group assignment is going to be occurring not this synchronous class meeting, but the next synchronous class meeting. You'll be developing a thoughtful question that will incite discussion. And so you can have more information about that at our first class meeting. There's also a term paper due on the 4th week of the class, and then finally attendance and participation at all of the synchronous class meetings. All assignments are to be submitted to UNM Learn. Please check the assignments folders for submission instructions. So the assignments folder is in UNM Learn. All of your assignment portals will be in that folder. So you don't have to be searching through different folders to find out where you submit an assignment. They're all right there for you. You can also check the syllabus for detailed information about your assignments. So please let me know again if you have any questions, but everything should be there for you. The syllabus also has all the grading criteria that I will be applying as I'm grading your assignments. We're going to spend time going over the presentation groups and case studies in more detail in our first meeting. I will also talk more about the term paper. If you have any additional specific questions, just let me know. No extra credit is available for the course, and because it's a graduate course, you must have at least a C or better in order to pass. So, in conclusion, I'm very excited to finally get the opportunity to teach this. There are a lot of details to consider, so please read the syllabus carefully and let me know if you have any questions. As always, I'm available via email or with an arranged Zoom meeting. Thank you very much.